mean, why did God institute the church as opposed to any number of things that he might have done in the alternative? He could have, he could have made it where it was just you and him, right? Just a one-on-one relationship. Not having to have support or encouragement or nurture from other folks. Why the church? The church marks the extraordinary path that God offers to us, to himself. In his book, The Social Animal, David Brooks summarizes vast amounts of social science research by stating that information programs alone are not very effective in changing behavior. He writes, both reason and will are obviously important in making moral decisions and exercising self-control. But neither of these character models has proven very effective. You can tell people not to eat the French fry. You can give pamphlets about the risk of obesity. You can deliver sermons, he says, urging them to exercise self-control and not eat the fry. Now, at this point, let me interject. This sermon this morning is not to try to tell you not to eat French fries. Otherwise, I would have to simply proclaim hypocrisy in me. And in their non-hungry state, most people will vow not to eat it. But when their hungry self arises, their well-intentioned self fades and they eat the French fry. Most diets fail because the conscious forces of reason and will are simply not powerful enough to consistently subdue unconscious urges. The evidence suggests reason and will are like muscles and not particularly powerful muscles. In some cases, and in the right circumstances, they can resist temptation and control the impulses. But in many cases, they are too weak to impose self-discipline by themselves. In many cases, self-delusion takes control. Why do I share that at the beginning of this sermon? I think he's captured something here. And I think all too often the church tries to return to some sort of information sharing program where we just tell people, this is what you ought to do, this is what you ought to be like in order to be a Christian. And we forget that reason and will are not alone enough. That we are dependent. And we're dependent on a couple of things that are far more powerful than simply our will and our determination. One of those things is grace. Paul points it out clearly in this passage from Ephesians. It is by grace that we are saved. It is a gift of God, not as a result of our effort, not as a result of our striving, not as a result of our self-control. It is grace infused into our life by God that gives us hope for redemption. I just had a granddaughter born. Hallelujah. That's fun. I want to tell you, about a week ago, my son texted me. And he said, this pregnancy stuff has got to stop. I called him. There's some things you just can't do through text messaging. He was at a point in his life where he had not experienced certain realities. He had not experienced certain realities of pregnancy and how that that changes women. And how that draws down on the reserves that one has. And how it forces one to love somebody in a new way. He hadn't experienced it for himself, and so he needed to draw on the experience of someone else. He needed someone else to lay out the path for him. And I told him, son, this will end with childbirth. That's when it is. And then that starts a whole new revolution. And you have to learn. But it's good to have someone who has gone before you to at least tell you there's a way out. There's a way beyond. What we do in the church is we gather together and we tell each other, here's the way that I found in walking with Jesus, that I can get through this life, this part of life, this burden in life, this experience of life, this discouragement in life, this hardship in life. We are the church. We mark the path. It's an extraordinary groove. Now, I used the word groove for a reason, which we'll come to later on. Just hang in there with me. Groove is another word for path, if you will. It's an extraordinary groove. The Rookie is a movie based on a true story of Jimmy Morris, a high school teacher and baseball coach who became a Major League Baseball pitcher. Is there baseball in heaven? Hallelujah. Yes, there is. All right. And it's the season, right, for baseball stories? Good. Okay. Several of the high school students who had been on the receiving end of Morris's fastballs encouraged him to try out for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Because of his age and his past injuries, Morris dismissed their encouragement as wishful thinking. Morris knew the Major League scouts would not consider us prospect unless he could throw 90 miles per hour. Inwardly, however, Morris can't shake his curiosity. And so while driving his pickup truck down a deserted country highway, that's this author's description of it. If you've been to Big Lake, Texas, you understand that there is no road that is not a deserted highway. Morris spots a sign that displays the speed of oncoming traffic. Morris slows his truck and pulls to the side of the road. Looking to see if anyone is watching, Morris grabs a baseball, walks into the road, and tosses the ball past the sign. The number 46 quickly flashes on the sign. It works. This sign can tell him how fast he can throw. Morris smiles and walks swiftly back to the truck to grab an old baseball glove and another baseball. A car drives down the highway, one of only 3 that day. And Morris quickly turns and leans nonchalantly against his truck. He walks back onto the road and takes one more look to see if anyone is coming. Then he winds up and throws the ball with everything he has. The sign stares blankly back at him for a moment, and then it flashes 76. Discouragement falls over Morris's face. He walks slowly to retrieve the baseballs. What Morris does not see is the sign blinking for a moment and the 7 becoming a 9. Morris has actually thrown a fastball at 96 miles per hour. Yet he remains unaware of his own strength. We have an extraordinary path that God offers to us. He has created in you a capacity to contain the greatest power that has ever been known in the universe. His grace. somebody else, we believe. But it's hard to believe that it's possible for us. And so even when we begin to look for a sign, sometimes the circumstances end up discouraging us. The church is a place where you can find the path to God's riches placed into your hand. God's grace infused into your life. God's Spirit entering into your spirit to lift it up and redeem it and make it whole. Make it what He intended for it to be in the very beginning. It's an extraordinary group, marked by an extraordinary God. Now you'll know why I use the word group. It has a G. So you can look for G's here and in the future in this sermon. An extraordinary group marked by an extraordinary God. Several years ago in Britain, researchers went door to door asking persons about their belief in God. One of their questions: do you believe in a God who intervenes in human history, who changes the course of affairs, who performs miracles, etc.? When published, their study took its title from the response of one man who was seen as a rather typical person in his response. He answered, "No, I don't believe in that God. I believe in the ordinary God." How many of our friends and neighbors believe in just the ordinary God? The God who keeps His distance. The God who doesn't intervene. The God who has never really displayed much in terms of appreciation or power or ability to do something different in our lives. We want to keep God often at a safe distance, and therefore we conjecture an ordinary God, and we project that understanding onto Him, and we keep Him in the box, and we keep Him away, and we keep Him at bay. The truth is, we have the God who intervened in Nineveh. We have the God who sends prophets. We have the God who sends people into our lives and into our way in order to encourage us to look at the path. To look at what God has done, is doing, will do in your life and in mine. We are marking an extraordinary groove. It is marked by an extraordinary God. And it conveys an extraordinary gift. Travel back 200 years in Christian history to John Newton, the slave trader turned pastor at Hemline. Wrote the song, you may be familiar with it, Amazing Grace. He would receive almost unbelievable answers to his prayers because he believed in what he called large asking. When explaining what he meant, Newton would often cite the legendary story of a man who asked Alexander the Great to give him a huge sum of money in exchange for his daughter's hand in marriage. Alexander agreed and told the man to request of Alexander's treasurer whatever he wanted. So the father of the bride went and asked for an enormous amount. The treasurer was startled and said he could not give out that kind of money without a direct order. Going to Alexander, the treasurer argued that even a small fraction of the money requested would more than serve the purpose. "No," replied Alexander. "Let him have it all. I like that fellow. He does me honor. He treats me like a king and proves that by what he has, that he both believes me to be both rich and generous." Newton concluded, in the same way, we should go to the throne of God's grace and present petitions that express honorable views of the love, riches, and bounty of our King. What God do you profess? What God do you believe in? Do you believe in the ordinary God? The God that simply keeps His distance and lets you find your way the best way you can through life? Do you believe the God that has invested Himself, demonstrated His love for you in Jesus, in His life, in His death, in His resurrection? Do you believe in the extraordinary God? The God who grants you and me an extraordinary gift of grace, not just in the past, not just in some past experience of redemption and salvation, but ushers grace into your life right now and continues to do so into the future. I believe in a God who has offered us an extraordinary groove. It's given by an extraordinary God. It conveys an extraordinary gift. It is grace that we point to. Grace that we believe in. Grace that we live out of in order to perform the good works that God has given us to do. I believe in an extraordinary God. Will you ask, along with me, for Him to do extraordinary things through us?